Hello there, my very good friends. Andy here for WhatCulture Wrestling with my very good friend Michael Hamflett, and we are here today, this afternoon, to bust open the AEW conspiracy theory hidden in plain sight. There's a lot going on in this company at the moment, as we've just kind of figured out in our pre-filming planning meeting where we got confused between 7 different shows and 5 different returns and millions of different stadiums and stuff. But there's a lot going on in AEW, right? Collision's launching. This guy's here. Chick Magnet Phil is back.
Yeah.
Backstage complications. There's people he had a fist fight with on the roster. People are being kept apart. There's talk of brand splits, hard brand splits, soft brand splits, banana splits, doing the split, all kinds of stuff. I can't do one, otherwise I would volunteer, obviously. But yeah, there's a lot going on in AEW. And there are a lot of questions, more importantly, about who's going to land where, who's going to be on what show, how on earth are they going to have 2 pay-per-views in 2 weeks in different countries, while they also need to keep up with weekly television, which, by the way, now happens on a Saturday as well as everything else. However, you, Michael Hamflett, the other day, noticed something very interesting on the All-In poster?
Yeah, All-In Wembley.
This is the confusion that we're talking about here. That might hold some answers to how they're going to unpack this whole thing.
Yes. If you listen to Tony Khan in various interviews, podcasts and press scrums, and your question is everything in AEW great? You'll get the answer, yes, it's all great. But I've gone looking for answers elsewhere. The gorgeous Wembley poster, full of roster members that has sold, 65,000 plus tickets so far to that show without a match even being announced, has just about everybody within AEW that you'd want to see live and in person in that glorious history-making night. Or does it? I realised when CM Punk, this guy right here, was announced for the Collision before Forbidden Door in Toronto, that perhaps he would be there and not on the pay-per-view itself on the Sunday night. Of course, Forbidden Door's already looking like a dream card. You've got a bunch of AEW wrestlers, a bunch of New Japan fly-ins. It's going to be a magical night. You don't need the full AEW roster. And indeed, I suppose, unless you want the Kenta match, you don't necessarily need CM Punk. You don't potentially need FTR, let's say. You might not even need recent New Japan escapee Jay White. For example, just off the top of my head, all of these men are on Collision. All of these men are also not on the All-In poster. In fact, the only 2 people that we are aware are definitely going to work Collision based on the first poster that are on the All-In poster are current world champion MJF and current international champion Orange Cassidy. There is no FTR on the All-In poster. There, of course, is no CM Punk on the All-In poster. He wasn't announced as being back with the company when the show was released to the fans. There is no Jay White. There is no Juice Robinson. There is no House of Black, the current Trios champions. There are significant figures that you would anticipate would be part of All-In that are not. And that got me thinking. AEW also has a pay-per-view 7 days after All-In to promote in Chicago. In Chicago, Illinois, it's going to be All Out 2023. How do you do both of these shows 1 week apart? Well, is that the hard brand split hiding in plain sight? Does Dynamite feed into Wembley and does Collision feed into Chicago? And is that the way that Tony Khan is going to juggle these very difficult balls?
It's and we should clarify as well that we're not reporting anything here.
Rampant speculation.
We're unpacking something that you found, and I think is very interesting because I don't want to take credit for this. It's you,
and we don't want to take the blame.
If
this is not news.
Yeah. Well, if it was wrong, you can blame me. I don't mind that. But it is a really interesting one to pick apart, I think, because Tony at the Double or Nothing media scrum after the show, which was fortunately a lot less chaotic than some other ones have been, mentioned that it was important to him that the Collision, I'm confused again, the All-In is the first show in the UK, that this big visual of the 60,000 people or however many are going to be there at Wembley, this should be the first show. And then it's like, okay, but you're in the UK for several days before this, presumably they're not landing and just doing a show. No. But you have Collision the night before. So would it make sense then for AEW to film Collision while they're in the UK? Maybe book an O2 or a Copper Box or somewhere like that, a different venue for that. But when he says stuff like that in the press conference, you go, oh, okay. Well, what's the solution here going to be? Maybe that solution is this is part of the split. This is all kind of factoring in and continuing to just break down the personnel. Thunder Rosa obviously is going to be someone who's on Collision. Yep. She was mentioned as part of the intro, the press materials that came out and about. There's no sign of the Women's World Championship on this poster either, is there?
No,
unless I've
currently not.
completely missed that.
There was obviously now the currently injured Jamie Hayter, but
Yes.
there's the anticipation that as a British star, her and Saraya, for example, will play a big part in the role at Wembley Stadium.
And they are on Dynamite.
And they are currently on
Presumably.
Dynamite. Yeah.
So we know the champions are going to be floating around a little bit, right? So at the moment, something like the Outcasts, they might end up floating around with Tony because it makes sense to keep people together. But at the same time, it's going to be really fascinating to see how they go about this brand split in general, whatever form it takes. I know Tony spoke this week in media appearances, just stressing the need for flexibility and things like that. And I'm glad in a way that they haven't gone down the draft route. I think that primarily because the discourse would have been insufferable. Copying WWE, all of this stuff, it would have come out, even though it's a good way to sort rosters out. And most good art is theft anyway, right? So, but this route is... I can see why they've kept their cards kind of close to the chest with regards to public announcements and stuff like that.
I do think as well, right now, Collision is being prepped as this huge deal for AEW, like a great opportunity. I'm sounding like Tony Khan now, but a great opportunity to like get a stronger foothold in, of course, with WB in a negotiation year. He has unfortunately found that Rampage has developed a nervousness around Collision rather than excitement. The failure of stopping Rampage becoming a B show from becoming a secondary concern has tainted the launch of Collision, I would say, compared to if you remember how it felt when Rampage was kicking off. There was just kind of universal excitement for an extra hour. Instead, it's become...
This guy did help.
He did, absolutely. But ultimately, the continued othering of Rampage has kind of left it as this sort of extracurricular concern, not something that is necessarily part of your wrestling diet. Tony Khan will not want that for Collision. And if by August you've got a live Collision in America on a Saturday built into a Chicago pay-per-view that doesn't interfere with All In and Wembley and all the buzz and all the hype and all the excitement, that's no bad thing. Now, of course, again, I feel like we have to say speculation. What this does mean is the potential for some fans in the UK to perhaps be disappointed with those that might not work the show. Like, we're talking big names here. CM Punk, FTR, the House of Black, Thunder Rosa potentially, like to name but just four there. The acts that suddenly find themselves on Collision might have to be told. The big Wembley night ain't going to be your big night. There's a pay-per-view payday in Chicago that's going to be money, but the big night in Wembley, the big sort of history-making event, isn't going to be yours. Perhaps those conversations have already happened, or perhaps they never will do, because everything here is just complete, rampant, empty speculation, and by Saturday night, me and you might be on the stream watching the Elite invade Collision to batter CM Punk in an angle to prove that, in fact, they've all made friends. Like, this is just stuff to look at now before we've seen, as you say, like the pieces kind of slot into place.
Yeah, and like the Collision launch in itself has been quite something. As of last week, at the very least, even though like 5 of the first 6 shows are taking place in Canada, I don't think as of last week they'd actually confirmed how to watch it in Canada. Here in the UK, they've just announced that if you subscribe to AEW Plus on Fight TV, like you should subscribe to this channel right here, that's how you watch it over here. But yeah, I mean, going to England and Wembley and everything, maybe if they do use wrestlers from both shows, I don't know, home and away dressing rooms, you can keep people apart maybe.
It's a big stadium. It's a massive stadium.
It's a big ass stadium. Maybe some people can be in an executive box over here. But then it gets political. It's like, who gets the best dressing room? CM Punk and the Elite. And the whole thing becomes another silly, overblown situation, the likes of which can only happen in 2 places, pro wrestling and Scottish football.
Indeed.
But look, there's going to be so much to pick apart over the next few days, weeks, months, years, millennia. We'll be here on Saturday night, as Michael's just said. About an hour early, maybe a little sooner. Well, we've got the details up on the channel right this second. Check them out. We're streaming Collision's first episode. We're streaming Samoa Joe versus CM Punk 1. Before that, which you can find on YouTube. We'll be back with details on that. And yeah, man, let's just see what happens with all of this nonsense. If you enjoyed our time here today, check this video out right here. You'll enjoy that too. Goodbye.